These are the most catastrophic financial disasters in rock touring history, where million-dollar productions became multi-million-dollar nightmares that nearly destroyed the careers of some of music's biggest names. When we think of rock tours, we imagine sold-out stadiums, screaming fans, and mountains of cash flowing into band coffers. But behind the glamour lies a harsh reality. Touring is an incredibly expensive gamble, where a single mistake can cost tens of millions of dollars. Today we're exploring disasters like U2's PopMart Tour and the Montreal riot that destroyed Guns N' Roses, examining how ambitious visions, technical failures, and sheer hubris turned dream tours into financial catastrophes that still haunt the music industry decades later. Chapter 1: The PopMart Disaster. Our journey begins in the mid-1990s with one of the most ambitious and ultimately disastrous productions in rock history, U2's PopMart Tour. To understand just how spectacularly this tour failed, we need to go back to December 1996, when U2 found themselves in an impossible situation. Their manager, Paul McGuinness, had already booked a massive worldwide tour with dates locked in across multiple continents. But there was just one problem. The album was not finished. The band was still struggling to complete their pop album, yet the pressure was immense. They had committed to a touring schedule that would begin in April 25, 1997, and the financial machinery was already in motion. As Bono would later admit, letting McGuinness book the tour before the album was finished was the worst decision U2 ever made, because it forced them to rush the creative process and compromise their artistic vision. The real disaster was yet to come. When PopMart was announced on February 12, 1997, at a press conference held at a Kmart in New York City, the irony was already thick. Here was one of the world's biggest rock bands announcing their most expensive tour ever in the aisles of a discount retailer, and that symbolism would prove prophetic. The PopMart stage design was nothing short of extraordinary. Willie Williams and Mark Fisher created a production that featured the world's largest LED screen, an animatronic lemon that the band would emerge from during concerts, a giant olive on a 100-foot toothpick, and a massive fiberglass arch that towered over everything. The LED screen alone was a technological marvel, with pixels manufactured by Sako Technologies, a Montreal-based company that specialized in control systems for nuclear power stations. U2 was their first entertainment client, and Sako had zero experience with video technology before this project. The numbers were staggering. PopMart cost between $214,000 and $250,000 per day to operate, even when the band was not performing. With a tour crew of 250 and an additional 200 hired at each venue, the production was a logistical nightmare that required military-level precision. Canadian promoter Michelle Cole had invested heavily in the tour, anticipating it would gross $260 million, which would have made it $20 million more profitable than the Rolling Stones' Steel Wheels tour. According to concert industry data tracked by Polestar, the trade publication that monitors touring economics, this kind of daily operating cost was unprecedented for the era. When PopMart launched on April 25, 1997 in Las Vegas, the problems became immediately apparent. The opening show was plagued by technical difficulties that created awkward pauses, lighting systems that malfunctioned, and pacing that felt completely disjointed. The massive LED screen, which was supposed to be the tour's centerpiece, suffered from synchronization issues that left concertgoers watching a disconnect between the audio and visual elements. Those technical problems were just the beginning. The real catastrophe was unfolding at the box office, where American audiences were not responding to the tour despite U2's massive global popularity. Ticket sales were sluggish, and the band found themselves playing to half-empty stadiums in major markets. The media quickly dubbed it Flopmart, and critics savaged both the album and the production. The financial reality was brutal. With operating costs exceeding $250,000 daily, every unsold ticket represented a direct hit to the tour's profitability. The break-even point required near-capacity crowds at premium ticket prices, something the tour struggled to achieve in key American markets. Atlanta promoter Peter Conlon called the tour a lightning rod for everything that is wrong with this business, accusing the band of reaping the seeds of greed. The criticism stung because there was truth to it, since the production had become so elaborate and expensive that it required near-perfect attendance to break even. The tour's low point came during a concert in Oslo, when the giant animatronic Lemon malfunctioned, trapping the band inside in a scene that could have been lifted directly from the mockumentary This Is Spinal Tap. Bono later described the entire PopMart experience as one big, expensive party, but the joke was costing them millions. Despite the American struggles, PopMart found its redemption in unexpected places. The September 1997 concert in Sarajevo became one of the tour's most powerful moments, as the band performed in a city still recovering from the Bosnian War. The symbolic power of bringing such an elaborate production to a place that had endured such devastation gave the tour emotional weight that transcended its commercial failures. When PopMart finally concluded on March 21, 1998, the numbers told a mixed story. The tour had grossed $173.6 million from 3.98 million tickets sold across 93 shows, and while this sounds impressive, it fell far short of the projected $260 million. The difference between gross revenue and net profit became painfully clear. The band received an advance of at least $50 million and perhaps as much as $80 million. But after covering the massive production costs, their actual profit was minimal. More damaging was the artistic cost, since the rushed pop album was widely considered their weakest work to date, and the tour's mixed receptions damaged their reputation for creative excellence. Chapter 2: Montreal, 1992. PopMart, for all its problems, wasn't a single-night catastrophe. That distinction belongs to one of the most infamous evenings in rock history, August 8, 1992, at Montreal's Olympic Stadium, when the Guns N' Roses and Metallica co-headlining tour imploded in spectacular fashion. The tour had started with such promise. Announced on May 12, 1992, the pairing of metal's two biggest acts seemed like a guaranteed success, with both bands at their commercial peak and the stadium tour designed to be the rock event of the decade. But by the time they reached Montreal, cracks were already showing. James Hetfield, Metallica's frontman and rhythm guitarist, had been dealing with the stress of performing with elaborate pyrotechnics night after night. The stage design incorporated massive flame effects that required precise timing and positioning. On that August evening, during Metallica's performance of Fade to Black, a miscommunication with the pyrotechnics director led to disaster. Hetfield accidentally stepped onto a magnesium flash grate just as it ignited, sending a fountain of 3,200-degree flames directly onto his left arm. The injury was severe. Hetfield suffered second and third-degree burns, and Metallica's set ended immediately as he was rushed to the hospital. The crowd of 53,000 was left confused and angry, with many not understanding what had happened. What should have been a brief intermission stretched into a 3-hour wait, as officials debated whether to cancel the show entirely. When Guns N' Roses finally took the stage, the situation went from bad to catastrophic. Axl Rose, who had been diagnosed with severe vocal cord damage just days earlier, was struggling with the sound system and his own physical limitations. After performing only 9 songs, Rose made an announcement that would trigger one of the worst riots in concert history. He said, "In case anybody here is interested, this will be our last show for a long time." With those words, Rose and the band left the stage, abandoning 53,000 frustrated fans who had waited all evening for a full show. The reaction was swift and violent, as concertgoers began tearing apart the stadium, starting fires and attacking security personnel. The riot spilled into the streets of Montreal, where police cruisers were overturned and storefronts were looted. By the time the violence subsided in the early morning hours of August 9th, the damage was estimated between $400,000 and $600,000. 30 police cars were damaged, 8 officers sustained injuries, and 12 people were arrested. This kind of crowd violence wasn't unprecedented in rock history. The Who's Cincinnati disaster in 1979 had already demonstrated how quickly concerts could turn deadly when crowd control failed. However, the Montreal riot represented more than just property damage. It was a financial catastrophe that reverberated throughout the remainder of the tour. The incident forced a 17-day break while Hetfield recovered and the bands dealt with the legal and public relations fallout, triggering force majeure clauses in insurance policies and venue contracts. When the tour finally resumed on August 25th in Arizona, the momentum was completely broken, and insurance claims, legal settlements, and the costs of canceled shows added millions to the tour's losses. For Guns N' Roses specifically, the impact was devastating. Slash later revealed in his memoirs that the band hobbled home with 20% of what they expected to earn. And Duff McKagan disclosed that despite the tour's apparent success, the band didn't turn a profit until 1993 due to the extravagant costs and the Montreal-related losses. The riot also had long-term consequences. Guns N' Roses was banned for life from the Olympic Stadium, and they have never returned to Montreal since that disastrous night. Chapter 3: The Stonehenge Incident. No tour disaster captures the absurdist spirit of rock excess quite like Black Sabbath's Born Again tour of 1983, featuring what became known as the Stonehenge Incident. This catastrophe was so perfectly absurd that it would later inspire one of the most famous scenes in the rock mockumentary This Is Spinal Tap. Black Sabbath was in a transitional period, having recruited former Deep Purple frontman Ian Gillan to replace Ozzy Osbourne. The Born Again album was released in August 1983, and the band wanted a stage production that would match their dark, mystical image. Manager Don Arden commissioned LSD light and sound design to create an elaborate Stonehenge-themed stage set that would serve as the tour's centerpiece. The concept was ambitious, massive stone-like columns meant to create an ancient, mystical atmosphere during performances. The design called for structures that were 15 feet tall, large enough to be impressive, but small enough to fit on any stage. However, when the blueprints were sent to the manufacturers, a critical error occurred. The measurements were misinterpreted. The manufacturers read feet as meters, so instead of 15-foot columns, they built structures that were 45 feet tall. When the set pieces arrived for the tour's North American leg in October 1983, the band discovered the mistake in the most embarrassing way possible. The Stonehenge replicas were so massive that they could not fit through the doors of most venues, let alone onto the stages. There was not a concert hall in North America that could accommodate structures of that size. The band was forced to cancel numerous shows, losing hundreds of thousands of dollars in ticket sales and venue deposits. Geezer Butler later recalled the horror of the discovery. He said the people who made it saw 15 meters instead of 15 feet. It was 45 feet high and it would not fit on any stage anywhere, so we just had to leave it in the storage area. It cost a fortune to make, but there was not a building on Earth that you could fit it into. For the shows where they could partially use the set, only fragments of the Stonehenge design appeared on stage, creating a bizarre spectacle that confused audiences and embarrassed the band. The production costs had already been paid, but the set was essentially unusable, representing a complete loss of the investment. The story became even more surreal when Rob Reiner's film This Is Spinal Tap was released in 1984. The movie featured a scene where the fictional band deals with a Stonehenge stage prop that is too small rather than too large, but the core absurdity was identical. Geezer Butler later confirmed that he had told the film's scriptwriters about Black Sabbath's real-life disaster, providing inspiration for what became one of cinema's greatest rock satire moments. Adding to the tour's bizarre atmosphere was manager Don Arden's decision to open each show with a dwarf dressed as the demonic baby from the Born Again album cover. Ian Gillan later revealed his horror at this theatrical choice. He said, "We noticed a dwarf walking around the day before the opening show, and we were saying to Don, we think this is in the worst possible taste, this dwarf, you know?" And Don was going, "Nah, the kids will love it. It will be great." The combination of the unusable stage set, the controversial opening act, and the general chaos of the production made the Born Again tour a financial disaster that cost the band their momentum and credibility. While the exact financial losses were never disclosed, industry estimates suggest the Stonehenge mistake alone cost over $500,000 in 1983, equivalent to nearly $1.05 million today. Chapter 4. The History Disaster. These individual disasters pale in comparison to the systematic financial catastrophe of Michael Jackson's History World Tour, which ran from 1996 to 1997 and became one of the most expensive productions in entertainment history. Despite Jackson's massive global popularity and the tour's ultimate success in terms of attendance, the financial structure was so top-heavy that it struggled to generate actual profits. The History Tour was designed to be the ultimate spectacle, featuring elaborate staging, massive video screens, complex choreography, and a production crew that numbered in the hundreds. Jackson spared no expense in creating what he envisioned as the definitive concert experience, working with promoters, including what would later become AEG Live, to mount the massive production. But the first leg of the tour lost an estimated $26 million, despite selling out most venues. Tour director Paul Gongaware, who was brought in to restructure the production's finances, testified in court that even after he implemented significant cost-cutting measures, the tour barely broke even. This was remarkable, considering that the History Tour was attended by over 4.5 million fans and grossed over $165 million, making it the highest-grossing tour of the 1990s by a solo artist. The disconnect between gross revenue and net profit highlighted a fundamental problem with mega-productions. The bigger and more elaborate they become, the more difficult it becomes to achieve profitability. Jackson's perfectionist approach meant that every aspect of the production was designed to be the best possible, regardless of cost, creating concert rider requirements that were unprecedented in their complexity and expense. The financial pressures of these failed tours had lasting consequences for the artists involved. U2's experience with PopMart led them to scale back their ambitions for subsequent tours, though they would later push the envelope again with their 360-degree tour, which featured even more elaborate staging. That production cost between $25 million and $35 million per claw structure. 3 were built to support the global tour, and daily operating costs reached approximately $750,000, not including stage construction, making it the most expensive tour production in history. Guns N' Roses never fully recovered from the Use Your Illusion tour disasters. The band's internal tensions, exacerbated by the financial pressures and Axl Rose's increasingly erratic behavior, led to a gradual dissolution that lasted for decades. The Montreal riot became symbolic of everything that could go wrong with rock excess, and the band's reputation for unreliability made promoters increasingly reluctant to work with them. Black Sabbath's Stonehenge disaster became a cautionary tale about the importance of attention to detail in large-scale productions. The mistake was so fundamental and so avoidable that it highlighted the chaos that often existed behind the scenes of major tours. The band's credibility was damaged, and they never achieved the same level of commercial success again. What these disasters teach us about the music industry extends far beyond simple cautionary tales about measurement mistakes or pyrotechnic safety. They reveal the fundamental tension between artistic ambition and financial reality that exists at the heart of rock music, where the drive to create bigger, more spectacular productions often pushes artists and promoters beyond the boundaries of financial logic. The technology that makes modern concert productions possible has also made them exponentially more expensive. U2's LED screens, Metallica's pyrotechnics, and Michael Jackson's elaborate staging all represented cutting-edge technology that came with cutting-edge costs. When these systems work perfectly, they create unforgettable experiences, but when they fail, they create unforgettable disasters. Most importantly, these stories illustrate how quickly success can turn to failure in the live music industry. A single night can destroy months of planning and millions of dollars in investment. The Montreal riot lasted only a few hours, but its consequences affected Guns N' Roses for decades, and U2's technical difficulties in Las Vegas set the tone for an entire tour that never quite recovered from its opening night problems. The legacy of these tour disasters continues to influence how major productions are planned and executed today. Insurance policies are more comprehensive, backup systems are redundantly redundant, and contingency planning covers scenarios that seemed unthinkable before these catastrophes occurred. The Montreal Olympic Stadium installed new safety protocols after the riot, and concert venues worldwide upgraded their security procedures. Modern touring companies like Live Nation Entertainment now implement sophisticated risk management systems to prevent the kind of catastrophic failures we have examined. Yet for all the lessons learned and precautions implemented, the fundamental risk remains unchanged. Every major tour is still a massive financial gamble, where artistic vision collides with commercial reality, and the scale has only grown larger, with artists like U2, Taylor Swift, and Beyoncé mounting productions that cost more to operate in a single day than entire albums cost to record. These most expensive tour disasters in rock history remind us that behind every spectacular concert experience lies an intricate web of logistical challenges, financial pressures, and human ambitions that can collapse in an instant. They are stories of hubris and humility, of technological triumph and failure, of artistic vision pushing beyond practical limitations. Most importantly, they are reminders that in rock and roll, as in life, the bigger the dreams, the more spectacular the potential disasters. The next time you attend a concert and marvel at the seamless integration of lights, sound, and spectacle, remember these cautionary tales of when everything that could go wrong did go wrong, creating some of the most expensive and memorable disasters in entertainment history.